They didn't knock. They didn't announce themselves. They came like a storm for squad cars tearing down a quiet suburban street, red and blue lights slicing through the morning calm, tires screeching against pavement like war drums. Marcus. Kane had just poured his second cup of black coffee when he heard the first shout hands where I can see him, followed by the chaos of boots pounding across his front yard. His dog, Duke, a big brown shepherd with graying fur and a gentle soul, barked once loud and startled, and that was enough. A split second later, there was a sharp crack of a gunshot, then silence, deafening, gut-wrenching silence. Marcus didn't even see which one of them pulled the trigger. He just saw Duke fall, right there, on his own front lawn, eyes wide, legs twitching, blood pooling into the grass that Marcus had cut just 2 days ago. He dropped the coffee, glass shattered. His knees gave out. He crawled to Duke's side, hands trembling, heart pounding like a war drum. No, 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 boy, stay with me, stay with me. But Duke was already gone. The officers didn't speak to him, didn't explain. One of them holstered his weapon, like he'd just put down a threat instead of someone's best friend. Another muttered, "Dog came at us aggressive." Marcus looked up, his face carved in disbelief. He barked, "You broke into my yard, what did you expect him to do?" One officer shrugged, "Got a call, said someone dangerous lives here, said he had a vicious dog." Marcus wanted to scream. Instead, he just stared at them, lips trembling, eyes locked on the badge numbers he would never forget. None of them looked back. They turned, laughed, walked away like they hadn't just shattered the only peaceful thing he had left in his life, like they hadn't just shot the one soul who stood by him when the rest of the world had moved on. Neighbors peeked through blinds but didn't come out. No one ever did, not for a man like Marcus, not for a black veteran with a service. Dog and a silent life. His phone stayed in his pocket. What would he even say? "Hi, 911? The people who murdered my dog are the same ones you'd call for help." He sat there in the grass, stroking Duke's fur, tears rolling down weathered cheeks. The warmth was already fading from his friend's body, and so was something else, something in Marcus that had held steady for years. His quiet, his calm, his willingness to be left alone, that part of him died with Duke. Later that afternoon, when the world seemed to forget what had happened, Marcus stood alone beneath the oak tree in his backyard with a shovel in his hand, and a rage inside him that he hadn't felt in over a decade. He dug the grave himself, no ceremony, no one watching, just him, dirt, and grief. After Duke was buried, he walked into the house, down the creaking steps to the basement he hadn't entered in years. It was dark, dusty, quiet. He flicked the light switch and the single bulb buzzed overhead. In the far corner, beneath a blue tarp and old army crates, sat a metal chest trusted, locked, and untouched since the day he promised to never be that man again. But promises are fragile things, especially when the world shows you that mercy means nothing to those with power. He pulled the chest forward, entered the code he still remembered by heart, 7 to 5 Delta. With a slow click, it opened. Inside, a folded flag, a Delta force patch, a weathered photo of a team long gone, and beneath it all his past, custom tactical gloves, a sidearm, medals the government buried in bureaucracy, a worn file stamped classified restricted access. Marcus stared at the items like they were ghosts, and maybe they were. He reached inside and pulled out a small black tag. It read, "Kane, M Delta 9, lethal clearance level 1, the man the world forgot, the man the cops never saw coming." He didn't feel anger anymore. He felt precision, purpose, the kind that used to only come before missions where someone wasn't supposed to walk away. But this wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about something deeper, something colder. They killed my dog. Thinking I was just another black man on their list, but Marcus Kane wasn't just anyone. He was the man they used to send when negotiations failed, when diplomacy collapsed, when enemies had to disappear without making a sound. And now he was awake again. There's something sacred about silence. Marcus Kane had spent years building a life wrapped in it: quiet days, slow mornings, no headlines, no uniforms, no orders, just him, Duke, and the rhythm of survival. but now that silence felt like a mockery. It echoed through his walls like laughter he couldn't silence. He sat on the edge of the bed that night, still in the same clothes, Duke's collar clenched in his hand like a medal of war. His phone buzzed with a message from his old VA group, but he ignored it. Nothing in that world could reach him now. They hadn't just killed a dog, they had desecrated the one thing keeping him human. The truth was, Duke hadn't just been a pet, he was a war companion, a therapy dog. The only soul that had stayed when Marcus returned from a war that never really ended inside his head. And now? Now Marcus felt something in his chest snap clean, silent, and final. He walked down to the basement again, this time not with grief, but with something colder running in his blood, purpose. He flipped open the chest without hesitation. The smell of oil, leather, and time hit him like a memory grenade. Inside lay fragments of a man the world had deliberately forgotten. His Delta patch still held the desert dust from Kandahar. His combat boots, laced and ready, sat untouched. Since he last kicked them off after that final black bag mission in Mogadishu, he slid his hand across the metal case that once carried a suppressed sidearm, the one they issued only to Tier 1 operatives. In a false panel beneath it all, his credentials, Kane, Marcus, Delta Force, Clearance Level 1, stamped and sealed under a tag that said non-existent asset. It wasn't just a job title. It was an erasure, the government's way of saying, if you die, we never knew you. But now they were going to remember. Marcus began to move, not with rage, with routine, controlled, precise. He hadn't trained in 7 years, but his body hadn't forgotten. He went into the backyard just before sunrise, the same soil where he buried Duke, now becoming the ground where he brought himself back to life. Push-ups, burpees, one-arm chin-ups on the tree branch where Duke used to hang his rope toy. He ran laps down the dirt road, boots pounding like war drums in rhythm with his heartbeat. He was older, now slower, stiffer, but every drop of sweat, every sharp breath reminded him, I am still him, not the man on their records, not the quiet neighbor with gray in his beard, but the ghost they used to send when things went sideways. He didn't speak to anyone for 2 days, didn't need to. He drove out to a town 3 counties over, parked behind a hardware store, and opened a locker hidden beneath a hollowed cement slab. Inside, more gear, stored dry, untouched since Afghanistan, surveillance glasses, old burner phones, a flash drive with access logs from retired contacts. No guns yet, not yet. This wasn't about killing, this was about control, and the first step to control was information. He started digging not into their files, but their habits. The 4 officers from that morning, badge numbers etched in his mind like scars, patrol patterns, off-duty schedules. One was cheating on his wife with a bartender. In another county, another ran a fake overtime scam through dispatch. The third had priors for use of force complaints that disappeared in review. The fourth, the one who shot Duke, was the police chief's nephew. Of course, that's why they laughed. That's why they didn't even bother hiding their faces. They thought nothing would ever happen, but something was happening now. Marcus didn't rush. He calculated. The first officer, the one with the side hustle scamming hours, found his entire record leaked to Internal Affairs, anonymously, with time-stomped evidence. The second woke up to his mistress gone and his bank account drained, not stolen, just rerouted through traceable digital transfers that revealed everything. The third? His body cam footage, the one that disappeared from official logs, mysteriously played on the town's public access TV for 8 full minutes. 8 minutes of brutality, 8 minutes of truth, and the fourth? Marcus wasn't done with him yet, not even close. He knew they'd start to notice soon. That's what he wanted. Let them feel the walls closing in. Let them guess. Let them sweat. He didn't need to fire a shot. His mind was a battlefield they weren't trained to survive, and as the media started sniffing around wondering wife or decorated officers were suddenly exposed, the mayor issued a vague statement about privacy breaches and digital terrorism. But Marcus watched from his living room, arms crossed, face blank, while the words internal investigation echoed through the broadcast like a joke he'd heard one too many times before. This wasn't revenge. Not really. This was chess. And Marcus was the piece they thought had left the board. By the time the week ended, 3 officers had requested leave. One skipped town. The chief tightened security, ordered officers to travel in pairs, and whispered about calling in federal help. But the feds wouldn't touch this unless someone died, and Marcus didn't want anyone dead. Yet, all he wanted was for them to feel something they clearly forgot how to feel, fear, because they didn't just kill a dog, they killed peace. And now Marcus Kane, the man trained to vanish, to infiltrate, to eliminate threats before they spoke a word, was back in motion, and he was just getting started. The town of Eastbourne had always prided itself on being quiet, peaceful, safe, a place where folks waved from porches and police officers showed up just in time to lecture teenagers for skateboarding near the courthouse steps. But in the span of just 10 days, that illusion shattered like glass under a steel boot. The first officer disappeared on a Thursday morning. His cruiser was found abandoned near an overpass, engine still running. He wasn't dead, not even touched, just missing for 6 hours when he stumbled into the precinct later that evening. Dazed and shaking, he didn't say a word. He simply placed a USB drive on the captain's desk. On it was a grainy night vision footage of himself planting drugs in a car during a traffic stop last summer, time-stamped, location tagged, undeniable. He resigned within 24 hours, no charges filed, no public statement, just silence. And fear. 3 nights later, another one, a different officer. This time, it was far more public. Downtown traffic came to a halt when citizens saw a man duct taped to a light pole. He was in full uniform, bruised but breathing, his own body cam strapped to his chest and live streaming to a local Facebook page with thousands of viewers watching in real time. When officers arrived, they didn't know what was more shocking: the bruises or the footage. It showed him choking a young man behind the department during an off-the-books interrogation. The comments rolled in like thunder. How long's this been happening? Who's doing this? Finally, someone's making them pay. The chief called it an act of terror, but the people? They called it justice. The mayor held a press conference the next morning, standing stiff beside a line of uncomfortable police officials. This town, she declared, is under attack by a vigilante. We condemn these actions fully, but even her voice cracked on the word vigilante, because deep down maybe even she knew this wasn't just some random lunatic with a grudge. This was surgical, strategic, someone who knew their systems, their blind spots, their weaknesses, someone who understood exactly how to dismantle power without ever pulling a trigger. And that's when the whispers started. Retired military Colonel Robert Vance was watching the press conference from his cabin 2 states away when something about the method made him sit forward. The exposure tactics, the precision, the psychological dismantling without bloodshed, the restraint. He knew that pattern. He had trained that pattern. He walked over to his file cabinet and pulled an old photo one from the shadows of Baghdad, featuring a unit no one ever acknowledged. In the back row stood a tall, broad-shouldered black man with tired eyes and no smile. Kane. Vance whispered the name like a secret prayer. Oh no. Not him. Marcus Kane wasn't a myth. He was a ghost, the kind you never wanted to meet. Operated in over 15 Black Ops missions, all without official record, trained in psychological warfare, human terrain analysis, and high-risk containment. He didn't just fight enemies, he dismantled them, quietly, permanently, and now he was back. In Eastbourne, officers stopped sleeping. Security cameras doubled, panic set in like wrought under polished marble. Internal Affairs began rapid investigations. Trying to get ahead of the next leak, one officer quit before the sun rose, another faked illness and flew out of state. But none of them were safe. Marcus wasn't targeting randomly. He knew who had blood on their hands. He had mapped every complaint, every case that disappeared, every body that fell through the cracks of the justice system they claimed to protect. The files weren't hard to find. They were buried in public view, hiding behind bureaucracy and silence. All Marcus had to do was drag them into the light. By now, the local news was covering the story like a thriller. Eastbourne under siege, vigilante or hero? The community split in two. Some demanded justice for the exposed, others demanded justice from them. But none of them knew the truth that the man doing all this had lived right next to them for years. Quiet, polite, always kept to himself. They never asked who he was, never wondered why he never invited anyone over, why he never spoke about his past, why he flinched slightly at fireworks on the 4th of July. To them, he was just Marcus, the quiet black man with the dog who never caused trouble. Now they were seeing what he was capable of when trouble came to him. The chief of police, sweating under pressure, formed a special task force. They called in state officials, tried to track IP addresses, started questioning civilians like it was a manhunt, but it was useless. Marcus had learned how to disappear before half of them were even in uniform. He watched them scramble from a distance, watched as the system he once risked his life for twisted itself into knots trying to explain why truth felt like terrorism. Back at his house, Marcus sat in darkness, Duke's collar still hanging on the wall. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He wasn't doing this for recognition. He wasn't wearing a mask or a cape. He wasn't trying to be a hero. Heroes die broke, forgotten, buried under medals that mean nothing. He wasn't here to play by their rules. He was here to remind them, you never knew who I was, but now you'll never forget. It was only a matter of time before his name made the news, not the kind of news where truth speaks, but the kind where labels are thrown like darts: fugitive, terrorist, vigilante. They plastered Marcus Kane's military photo across every screen in Eastbourne, cropped just right to make him look more dangerous than decorated. No one mentioned the 27 confirmed operations he led that kept entire battalions alive. No one mentioned the hostage rescue mission that wasn't supposed to succeed but did because of him. No one mentioned the sleepless years after service, the therapy that never came, the medals shoved in a drawer because they were too heavy to wear in a town that only saw his skin, not his scars. Now they only saw what the system wanted them to see, a man gone rogue, but Marcus hadn't lost his mind. He had simply remembered who he was and who they were. The police scrambled to build a case, but every move they made was too late. Every attempt to track him ended in shadows. Every warrant came back empty. They didn't realize Marcus wasn't hiding. He was watching, listening, waiting for one thing, someone honest enough to ask why. And then came Jalen, rookie cop. Fresh badge, quiet eyes. He wasn't like the others, not yet. He used to wave at Duke during patrols, sometimes even toss him a snack through the fence. He was the only one in the department who'd read Marcus's name and didn't flinch, because he remembered, not as a threat, as a neighbor, a man who never spoke but always nodded. The kind of nod that said, I see you. Even if no one else does. Jalen started asking questions. Not the kind that get you promoted, the kind that get you isolated. Why did we shoot the dog again? Was there even a proper warrant? Why are we covering up past complaints? The more he asked, the colder the station became. The veteran officers shut him out. The chief pulled him aside and said, you want to keep your job, stop digging into ghosts. But Jalen had already started reading not the case files, but the silence between them, and in that silence he saw the truth. Marcus wasn't a threat. He was a reflection of everything the badge was supposed to mean. But no longer did. He found Marcus at the edge of the old freight yard just outside town. No backup, no gun drawn, just a man tired of swallowing the lies they fed him in training. Marcus was sitting in the shadows, cleaning something in his lap, not a weapon, but Duke's old collar. When Jalen stepped into view, Marcus didn't flinch. He looked up, eyes cold but calm. You here to finish the job? He asked. No. Jalen said, I'm here to listen. A long pause stretched between them like two worlds trying to speak the same language. Marcus set the collar down. They trained me to kill, then dumped me in a zip code no one watches, like a secret they didn't want to keep. I followed orders. I kept quiet, but when they killed my dog, that was the last thing tying me to peace. Jalen didn't interrupt. He just sat down on the opposite end of the bench, hands in his lap. I gave my life for a flag, Marcus said, voice low and steady, that they only wrap around coffins like mine. I buried brothers whose names didn't make the news. I carried memories that still wake me up shaking. And after all that, I came home to this. To what? Jalen asked quietly. Marcus looked him in the eye. To a country that sees the color of my skin before the weight of my service, to neighbors who smile but clutch their purses, to a system that teaches you to protect. Until you're the one who needs protecting, the wind howled softly through. The yard, somewhere in the distance, a train groaned to life. But in that moment, everything was still. I'm not doing this for revenge, Marcus said. I'm doing it so no one else has to bury their peace and pretend it's justice. This isn't about one dog, it's about the message they sent. When they pulled that trigger, they looked at me, saw no threat. Just a man they could leave bleeding. Jalen nodded slowly. And what happens now? Marcus picked up the collar again, brushing the tag with his thumb. Now, I finish what they started. I don't need to burn the whole system down. I just need to make it look in the mirror. Jalen stood. I don't agree with all of it. But I understand it. Marcus gave him the smallest smile. That's all I wanted. As Jalen walked away, he didn't call for backup. He didn't pull out his phone. He just looked over his shoulder one last time at a man they once strained to be invisible, who now stood as the clearest truth in the town's lies, and somewhere inside the station, the chief stared at a screen showing Jalen and Marcus. In the same frame, his voice shook as he muttered under his breath, God help us, he's not alone anymore. It ended not with an explosion, but with an email, a quiet click, a single press of send that sent 2.4 gigabytes of internal files, body cam footage, erased complaints, payroll fraud, whistleblower reports buried in locked cabinets. To every major news outlet in the state, no signature, no credit, just truth, raw and burning. And when the first anchor read the chief's name out loud, not as a protector, but as the architect of decades of racial profiling, corruption, and violence, the dam finally broke. The press conference was canceled. The mayor resigned. Within the week, officers walked out with heads down, stripped of badges they'd worn like armor against accountability. The Eastbourne Police Department, once seen as the face of safety, now crumbled under the weight of what Marcus Kane had. Dragged into the daylight. And all of it, every file, every fact had come from inside their own system. He didn't hack them. He didn't even need to. Because when the rot runs deep enough, all you have to do is rip off the roof and let the sun in. The chief tried to spin it. Said he was misinformed, that he had trusted the wrong people. But then came the videos, the one from 1998, where a young black teen was slammed into a cruiser and never seen again. The footage from 2004, where a bag of white powder appeared in a glove compartment mid-arrest, the settlement memos, the hush money, the audio tapes. The silence was gone now, replaced by the noise of consequence the kind Marcus had waited years to hear, but he didn't stand at a podium, he didn't speak to reporters, he didn't tweet, he vanished. By the time federal investigators arrived. In Eastbourne, Marcus Kane's home was empty. The dog bowl still sat near the back porch, a worn leash still hung by the door, but Marcus himself was gone, not because he was running, but because he'd already finished the mission. There was no glory in what he did, no revenge served hot, just a ledger that needed balancing. And a man who refused to die quietly while those who wronged him stayed in uniform. And now Eastbourne was different, the new interim chief younger. Black and fiercely principled, reopened over 40 closed cases. He didn't try to hide the mess, he owned it. The town began to talk not in whispers, but in open conversations, about race, about silence, about how easily power twists when no one is watching. Murals of Duke appeared near alleyways, candlelight vigils formed without invitation, and in the middle of it all stood one unlikely voice, Officer Jalen. He never revealed where he last saw Marcus, never broke his silence, but he spoke at town halls, he spoke with heart. And one quiet morning, he visited the small hill just outside town, the one where Duke was buried. The grave was different now. It had a stone marker, flowers, an American flag that hadn't been there before, fresh soil, freshly tended. Someone had come back. Jalen stood alone, hands in his pockets, eyes on the words etched into the stone. Loyal, loved, lost but never silent. He didn't need to say anything, because Marcus was watching. Not from the sky, not from a bunker, from the tree line, far enough not to be seen. Close enough to protect, a figure stood in the woods, still as the trees around him. Black coat, hood up, no weapons, just eyes steady, patient, knowing he could have stayed in the dark, could have walked away long ago, but Marcus knew that. Peace was never something the world gave freely. You had to fight for it, protect it, bury it under your skin like armor until someone tried to take it away. They came to his door with war, and he showed them what war really was. But now? Now he just wanted silence again, the good kind, the kind you earn, and if they ever came for it again, they'd find out he hadn't gone far, just far enough to let the world breathe again without forgetting who made it possible.